The gateway station hung in the silence of space like a massive metal flower, its petals made of docking ports and scanning arrays. Every day, thousands of beings from across the galaxy passed through its security checkpoints. Some were heading home after business deals. Others were starting new lives on distant colonies. For most, it was just another boring stop on their journey. Officer Vralkesh had worked security at the station for 12 years. He was a Castorian, which meant he had 4 eyes that could see in multiple spectrums and a patience that humans found almost annoying. Today felt like every other day. The morning shift had been quiet. A group of Zenthari merchants arguing about tariffs. A Plovian family with too much luggage. A Kresh soldier whose metal arm set off the alarms, but that was normal for his species. The security gate itself was old. Really old. Nobody knew exactly how ancient it was because the builders who made it had disappeared long before any current civilization had even invented the wheel. The gate was a perfect arch of some material that never corroded, never needed maintenance, and somehow scanned every molecule of every person who passed through it. Most days, it just hummed quietly and flashed green. That was it. Vralkesh was drinking his 3rd cup of stimulant brew when the human delegation arrived. Humans were still new to the galactic scene. They'd only made first contact about 3 years ago, stumbling out of their little corner of space with their clunky ships and their weird obsession with coffee. They were loud, curious, and had this annoying habit of asking questions about everything. But they were harmless enough. The delegation was 6 people, all wearing matching gray jumpsuits with Earth insignia patches. The first human stepped through the gate. A tall man with graying hair and a serious expression. The gate hummed, flashed green, and he walked through to collect his belongings on the other side. Normal. The second human, a woman with red hair tied back in a bun, passed through just as easily. Green flash. Next. 3rd, 4th, 5th. All green. All normal. Vralkesh barely paid attention anymore. He was already thinking about lunch and whether the station cafeteria would have those spicy Norvalian noodles he liked. Then the 6th human stepped up to the gate. She was young, maybe mid-20s in human years. Average height, brown hair pulled into a ponytail, wearing the same gray jumpsuit as the others. She had a datapad tucked under one arm and looked slightly nervous, the way people do when they're not used to space travel. Her ID badge said her name was Emily Carter and listed her profession as archaeologist. Nothing remarkable. Nothing special. She stepped into the gate scanning field. For exactly 2 seconds, nothing happened. Just the normal hum. Then every single alarm in the entire security checkpoint started screaming. Vralkesh jumped so hard he spilled his drink all over his console. Red lights exploded across every panel. The gate, which had stood silent and unchanged for thousands of years, suddenly began moving. Parts of it that nobody even knew could move started shifting and rotating. The air inside the arch shimmered like heat waves on a desert road. The other humans jumped back in panic. The girl, Emily, stood frozen in the scanning field, her eyes wide with terror. She tried to step backward, but it was like she was stuck in place. Then the symbols appeared. They materialized in the air around the gate, floating holographic characters in a language Vralkesh had never seen. They were beautiful and terrifying at the same time, glowing with a soft blue light. The symbols rotated and shifted, forming patterns that hurt to look at too long, as if they contained too much information for a normal brain to process. The station's AI, which normally handled translation for thousands of languages, started making a sound Vralkesh had never heard before. A stuttering, glitching noise, like it was choking on something too big to swallow. Then, finally, words appeared in Galactic Standard, the common language everyone used. They scrolled across every screen in the checkpoint, repeated over and over. Alert, Descendant of builders detected. Genetic match confirmed. Network access protocols initiated. Alert, Descendant of builders detected. The checkpoint fell silent except for the alarms. Every being in the area, whether they had 2 eyes or 6, whether they breathed oxygen or methane, stood absolutely still and stared at the human girl standing in the gate. The builders were myth. Legend. Ancient gods who had created the network of gates that connected the galaxy before vanishing into history so long ago that even their home world was lost. Every civilization used their technology, but nobody understood it. Nobody could recreate it. And nobody, in all of recorded history, had ever been identified as related to them. Until now. Emily Carter stood in the scanning field, still frozen, her face pale with confusion and fear. She looked at her fellow humans, at Vralkesh, at the symbols floating around her, and said in a small, shaky voice that was picked up by every microphone in the area. "What's happening? What does that mean?" Before anyone could answer, the station's emergency systems kicked in. Blast doors began slamming shut throughout the checkpoint. Automated defense turrets dropped from the ceiling. And somewhere deep in the station's core, alarms were waking up people who had the authority to make decisions way above Vralkesh's pay grade. The girl was still standing there, trapped in the light of a gate that had just recognized her as the heir to the most powerful civilization the galaxy had ever known. Vralkesh looked at his spilled drink, looked at the chaos erupting around him, looked at the terrified human girl, and thought that maybe he should have called in sick today. Within an hour, Emily Carter found herself sitting in the most intimidating room she'd ever seen. The High Council chamber was enormous, with a domed ceiling that displayed a live view of the stars outside. Around her sat representatives from 6 different galactic territories, each one looking at her like she was either a miracle or a bomb about to explode. Maybe both. Emily's hands wouldn't stop shaking. She clasped them together in her lap, trying to look calmer than she felt. Just this morning, she'd been excited about a routine trip to examine some old ruins on a colony world. Now she was at the center of a galactic incident she didn't understand. Ambassador Thelnara spoke first. She was from a species that looked like living crystal, and when she was agitated, her body refracted light in sharp, angry flashes. Right now, she was practically a disco ball of anxiety. "This has to be a malfunction," she insisted, her voice chiming like breaking glass. "We've catalogued human genetics. They're a standard carbon-based species. Evolution from Earth. Lucy, the fossil. Darwin. We've seen their entire history. There's no connection to the builders. It's impossible." A reptilian counselor named Kreshtar nodded his massive head. "The girl is clearly human. Look at her. She's terrified and confused. Does she look like a descendant of the most advanced civilization in galactic history?" Emily wanted to feel insulted, but honestly, he had a point. She was an archaeologist who still had student loans. She lived in a tiny apartment with a cat named Professor Whiskers. She was nobody special. But Vralkesh, who'd been brought in as a witness, stepped forward with a datapad. "The gate doesn't make mistakes," he said quietly. "It hasn't made a mistake in the 10,000 years we've been using it. And it's never, ever done what it did today." The council fell silent. Because that was the truth everyone was dancing around. The builder technology was perfect. Incomprehensible, but perfect. It didn't glitch. It didn't malfunction. If it said Emily Carter was a builder descendant, then either it was telling the truth, or reality itself had broken. "Run the test again," ordered Council Prime Alder, a being who looked vaguely like a floating jellyfish made of light. "Full genetic deep scan. Access the builder archives." Emily's stomach dropped. The what archives? Nobody answered her. 2 technicians approached with scanning equipment that looked way too medical for her comfort. "This won't hurt," one of them said, though his 3 eyes didn't look particularly reassuring. "We just need a full DNA sample and cellular analysis." The scan took 20 minutes. Emily sat perfectly still while machines hummed around her, mapping every gene, every chromosome, every piece of biological information that made her who she was. The results fed directly into a database that the council accessed with an authorization protocol so complex it took 5 of them entering code simultaneously. When the results came back, the chamber went completely silent. Vralkesh stared at his screen. Thelnara's crystalline body went perfectly clear, a sign of absolute shock in her species. Even Kreshtar, who'd been so dismissive before, leaned forward with his mouth hanging open. 97%, whispered one of the technicians. 97% genetic match to build a baseline. Emily's brain felt like it was short-circuiting. What does that even mean? Alder floated closer to her, his light pulsing slowly. "It means, Miss Carter, that you are genetically builder. The other 3% is human evolutionary adaptation. Mutations accumulated over an immense period of time." "But that's crazy," Emily said, her voice rising. "We know where humans came from. We have fossils. We have the entire evolutionary tree. Primates to hominids to Homo sapiens. It's all documented. We evolved on Earth from Earth species." "Or," said Thelnara slowly, her light patterns shifting to something like wonder, "Earth is where you were placed. Where they hid you." The words hung in the air like a physical weight. Emily's archaeologist brain, trained to piece together ancient puzzles, started working despite her shock. "You're saying the builders seeded Earth? That they put themselves there, somehow made themselves primitive, and let evolution run its course?" "It's the only explanation that fits," Alder said. The builders disappeared approximately 200,000 years ago. That's when the gates went dark, when their cities fell silent. And 200,000 years ago, anatomically modern humans appeared on Earth. Emily felt dizzy. But why? Why would an advanced civilization do that? Kreshtar pulled up a holographic display. It showed star maps, empire territories, and something else. A dark region of space marked with warning symbols. There are legends, he said, his voice lower now, respectful. Stories passed down from civilizations older than my own. They speak of the builders facing something. An enemy. A threat so terrible that they couldn't fight it. So they chose to disappear instead. They scattered themselves, Vralkesh added, staring at Emily with his 4 eyes wide. Across how many worlds, we don't know. They reduced themselves to primitive populations, hid themselves on forgotten planets, and waited. Waited for their descendants to evolve, to grow, to eventually find their way back to space. Earth was one of those hiding places, Thelnoro said. And you, Miss Carter, are proof that the plan worked. The builders didn't go extinct. They became you. They became all of humanity. Emily looked down at her hands. The same hands she'd used yesterday to carefully brush dirt off pottery shards. Hands that had petted her cat and made terrible coffee and struggled with opening jars. These were builder hands? There's more, the technician said nervously. The genetic markers aren't just heritage. They are functional. Active. Her DNA contains sequences that interface with builder technology. That's why the gate recognized her. That's why it activated. Her genetic code is literally an access key to the entire network. The implications of that statement rippled through the chamber like an earthquake. Every counselor understood instantly what it meant. The builder network connected thousands of worlds. It contained technology that could manipulate space and time. It held secrets that civilizations had been trying to unlock for millennia. And this one human girl had just inherited the master key to all of it. Emily felt like she couldn't breathe. I'm just an archaeologist, she whispered. I study dead civilizations. I can't. You are the living heir to the greatest civilization in galactic history, Alder said gently. Whether you're ready or not. Outside the chamber, Emily could hear alarms still echoing through the station. Security forces moving into position. Emergency protocols being enacted. And somewhere, she knew, messages were already racing toward Earth at faster-than-light speeds, carrying news that would change everything humanity thought they knew about themselves. They weren't just another species that had climbed out of caves and reached for the stars. They were the builders. They'd always been the builders. They'd just forgotten for 200,000 years. And now, ready or not, it was time to remember. They didn't give Emily much time to process what she'd learned. Within hours, she was being escorted through corridors of the gateway station she didn't even know existed. Vralkesh walked beside her, along with 2 heavily armed guards who looked like they weren't sure whether to protect her or protect everyone else from her. Where are we going? Emily asked for the 3rd time. Her voice echoed off walls that seemed older than the rest of the station, made of that same strange material as the gate. The material that never aged, never broke, never needed repair. The Nexus Core, Vralkesh said quietly. It's the heart of the station. Most of the council has only seen it once in their entire careers. Some never at all. And you're taking me there because? He glanced at her with his 4 eyes, and she could see something like fear in them. Because the station is asking for you. Ever since you passed through the gate, systems have been activating on their own. Doors we couldn't open before are unlocking. The core has been trying to connect with something. We think that something is you. Emily's stomach twisted into knots. She'd gone from excitement about ancient pottery to being the key to unlocking technology that gods had built. It was too much. Way too much. They reached a massive door at the end of the corridor. It was perfectly circular, covered in those same flowing symbols that had appeared around the gate. As they approached, the symbols began to glow, pulsing with a soft blue light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with Emily's heartbeat. That's new, one of the guards muttered nervously. The door began to open. Not sliding or swinging, but somehow folding space itself, reality peeling back like layers of paper until there was an entrance where solid metal had been moments before. The chamber beyond took Emily's breath away. It was huge, easily the size of a sports stadium, with walls that stretched up so high the ceiling was lost in shadow. Every surface was covered in the builder symbols, thousands of them, maybe millions. They glowed in different colors, creating a constellation of lights that made the room feel alive. In the center stood pillars of that same ageless material, arranged in patterns that hurt to look at too long, as if they existed in more dimensions than her brain could process. And it was all completely silent. Emily took a step inside, and the silence shattered. Sound erupted from everywhere and nowhere. Not loud, but present, like music played just below the threshold of hearing. The symbols on the walls brightened. The pillars began to hum with energy that made her teeth ache. "Miss Carter, perhaps you should step back," Vralkesh said, his voice tight with worry. But Emily couldn't step back. She was frozen, staring at the chamber as it came alive around her. Lights raced along pathways in the walls, patterns forming and reforming. Holographic displays materialized in the air, showing star maps and equations and things she had no words for. She reached out instinctively to steady herself against one of the pillars, her hand pressing flat against its surface. The moment her palm made contact, everything changed. The station shuddered. Emily felt it through the floor, through the pillar, through her bones. Somewhere far away, alarms began blaring again. Vralkesh was shouting something, but his voice sounded distant, muffled, like she was underwater. Because something was happening inside her head. Information was flooding in, too fast, too much, like trying to drink from a fire hose. She saw the network, all of it, every gate across the galaxy lighting up in her mind like a map she'd always known but forgotten. She felt the stations, the relays, the nodes that connected thousands of worlds. And deeper, underneath it all, she felt the architecture of reality itself, the way the builders had learned to bend space and time like clay. She gasped, trying to pull her hand away from the pillar, but she couldn't move. The data kept coming. She saw glimpses of the past, fragments of builder history downloaded directly into her consciousness. A civilization that hadn't just mastered technology but had rewritten the laws of physics to suit their needs. They'd built gates that folded space. Ships that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Weapons that could unmake stars. And she saw why they'd disappeared. The enemy came from outside. Outside the galaxy, outside known space, maybe outside reality itself. She didn't have words for what she saw in those fragmented memories, only terror so deep it felt like falling into an endless void. The builders had been mighty, but this thing, this presence, was something they couldn't fight. Couldn't negotiate with. Couldn't escape. So they'd done the only thing they could. They'd scattered. Broken themselves apart. Hidden their children on forgotten worlds with genetic locks that would only trigger when those children had evolved enough, grown enough, to potentially understand what was at stake. Earth had been one of dozens of hiding places. Maybe hundreds. And now, after 200,000 years, the locks were opening. Emily finally managed to pull her hand away from the pillar, gasping like she'd been holding her breath underwater. She stumbled backward, and Vralkesh caught her before she fell. "What happened?" he demanded. "What did you see?" Emily's mouth was dry. Her heart hammered in her chest. "Everything," she whispered. "I saw everything." The chamber around them had changed. The symbols were arranged differently now, forming patterns that hadn't existed moments before. The pillars hummed with power, a deep thrumming that she could feel in her chest. And across the galaxy, though she couldn't see it, every gate in the builder network had registered a change in status. For the first time in recorded history, the network had recognized an administrator. Someone with the genetic authority to access its deepest functions. The guards were backing away slowly, their weapons forgotten, staring at Emily like she'd grown a second head. Vralkesh held her steady, his four eyes wide with something between awe and fear. "The council needs to know," he said. "Whatever just happened, they need to know right now." Emily nodded weakly, but she was barely listening. In her mind, she could still feel the network. Not invasive, not controlling, but present. Waiting. Like a loyal dog that had been sleeping for millennia and had finally heard its master's voice again. And underneath that feeling, buried deep in the genetic memories that were still settling into her consciousness, was a warning. The thing the builders had run from, the enemy that had driven them into hiding, wasn't gone. It was still out there. Waiting in the dark spaces between galaxies. And by activating the network, by waking it up after all these years, Emily had just sent a signal into the void. A signal that said the builders were back. She looked at her hands, the same ordinary hands from this morning, and realized with absolute certainty that nothing would ever be ordinary again. Not for her. Not for humanity. The inheritance had been accepted. The lock had opened. Now they had to figure out what to do with what was inside, before something worse came looking for it. The message reached Earth in 12 hours. That alone was remarkable because normal communications took 3 days. But Emily had touched the network, and the network remembered how to move information faster than light in ways that made current technology look like tin cans connected by string. The United Earth government went into emergency session immediately. President Chen called for a global address within 6 hours. And the order went out to every human settlement, every colony, every outpost scattered across Earth's small corner of space. Every single human needed to pass through a Builder Gate scanner. They needed to know how many more descendants were out there. Emily watched the results come in from a secure room on Gateway Station. She hadn't slept in 30 hours. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the network, felt it humming at the edge of her consciousness. The council had her under what they politely called protective observation. What they really meant was they were terrified of what she might accidentally activate if left alone. The first results from Earth were shocking. Then they became staggering. Roughly 1 in every 10,000 humans carried the Builder genetic markers at significant levels. Most were dormant, inactivated, just sitting in their DNA like seeds waiting for the right conditions to sprout. But they were there. That meant approximately 800,000 people on Earth alone carried Builder genes. Add in the colonies, and the number jumped past 1 million. Some had concentrations even higher than Emily's. A 17-year-old kid named Tyler in Austin, Texas lit up the scanners so bright the techs thought their equipment was broken. They ran the test 4 times. Same result every time. A grandmother in Seoul. A fisherman in Norway. A teacher in Lagos. A mechanic in Sydney. They were everywhere, scattered through humanity like random pieces of an ancient puzzle. But Emily had been first. She'd awakened the network. And that made her different somehow, special in a way the scientists were still trying to understand. The network responded to her in ways it didn't respond to anyone else. When other descendants touched Builder technology, it recognized them. When Emily touched it, it obeyed her. That difference terrified the galactic community. Within days, the offers started coming. The Zenthari hegemony was first, sending a delegation with gifts and smiles and a proposal for a protective alliance. Emily sat through their presentation, watching their ambassador's feathers ruffle with excitement as he talked about mutual benefit and shared prosperity. What he really meant was give us access to Builder technology or we'll take it by force. The Plovian Confederacy was more subtle. They proposed a joint research council, with humanity as honored participants. The word they carefully avoided was subordinate. They wanted humans to hand over control of the network to older, wiser civilizations who clearly knew better how to manage such power. Even the Resonance Collective, usually peaceful and diplomatic, sent representatives suggesting that Builder technology should be administered by consensus. No single species should have sole control over something so powerful. It was only fair, they argued. Only reasonable. Only safe. Emily listened to them all. She sat through hours of presentations and proposals and thinly veiled threats. And with each one, she felt anger building inside her chest like a slow-burning fire. They were scared. She understood that. A species that had barely left its own solar system 3 years ago suddenly had access to technology that could reshape the galaxy. Of course they were scared. But underneath the fear was something else. Greed. The desire to control what they'd been using but never understanding for thousands of years. Finally, the Galactic Council convened a formal session. Every major civilization sent their highest representatives. The chamber was packed with beings of every imaginable shape and form, all of them focused on the small human woman standing at the center platform. Emily wore her gray jumpsuit still, refusing the formal robes they'd offered her. She looked tired, worn down, but there was steel in her spine that hadn't been there a week ago. Touching the network had changed her. Not just the knowledge it had given her, but something deeper. A sense of responsibility that weighed on her like gravity. Council Prime Alder floated forward, his light pulsing in formal patterns. Miss Carter. Humanity. The Council recognizes your genetic connection to the Builders. We acknowledge your right to access the network. However, given the devastating power of Builder technology, we must discuss appropriate oversight and control measures for the safety of all galactic civilizations. The chamber murmured agreement. Dozens of species nodding or making their equivalent gestures of approval. Emily looked around at them all. Then she said one word. No. The chamber fell silent. No? Thelnaro's crystalline form flashed with confusion. Miss Carter, perhaps you don't understand the magnitude. I understand perfectly, Emily interrupted, her voice steady despite her racing heart. You want us to hand over Builder technology. You want committees and councils and oversight. You want to make sure humanity doesn't become too powerful too fast. And you're all terrified that we'll use it the way you would use it. Kreshtar rose to his full height, scales rattling with indignation. You are one species among thousands. You've been in space for 3 years. 3 years. What makes you think you have the wisdom to control technology that could destroy galaxies? Nothing, Emily said simply. We don't have that wisdom. I don't have that wisdom. That's exactly why the answer is no. Confused murmurs rippled through the chamber. Emily took a breath and continued. The builders left safeguards in the network. I've seen them. Felt them. The technology won't fully unlock for anyone driven by fear, greed, or coercion. It requires readiness. Not just capability, but character. They designed it that way deliberately. She looked directly at Alda. You've all been using builder gates for thousands of years without understanding them. You've built civilizations on technology you can't recreate or repair. And you've been fine. You can keep being fine while humanity figures out what we've inherited. And if you misuse that inheritance, asked a delegate from a species Emily didn't recognize. If humanity makes a mistake that endangers us all. Emily thought about the vision she'd seen. The terror that had driven the builders into hiding. The enemy that might still be out there in the dark. Then we'll deal with the consequences, she said quietly. But we won't be bullied or threatened or manipulated into giving up what our ancestors left us. The builders scattered themselves across the galaxy and waited 200,000 years for their descendants to be ready. I think we owe it to them to at least try. The chamber erupted. Some delegates shouted approval. Others shouted outrage. But Emily had said her piece. She'd drawn the line. And somewhere deep in the network, she felt systems responding to her decision, recognizing it as the right one, locking down in ways that would take more than political pressure to overcome. Humanity had just told the galaxy no. And somehow, incredibly, the galaxy was going to have to accept it. Whether they liked it or not. 6 months had passed since that day in the council chamber. 6 months since Emily Carter had told the entire galaxy that humanity wasn't ready to wield godlike power, and that was exactly why they wouldn't be bullied into giving it away. Now she stood on Earth, in a facility that hadn't existed half a year ago. The building sprawled across what used to be empty desert in New Mexico, far from major cities but close enough to civilization to feel connected. It looked modest from the outside, just glass and steel and solar panels. But inside, something unprecedented was happening. Humanity was learning to understand itself. Emily walked through the training center, watching other descendants work with builder interfaces. There was Rachel, the grandmother from Seoul who discovered at 73 that her genes contained the key to technology beyond imagination. She was working with a holographic display, her wrinkled hands moving through symbols that rewrote themselves to match her thought patterns. Next to her sat Devon, the 17-year-old from Texas whose genetic markers had burned brighter than almost anyone's. He was laughing at something, his youth making all of this seem like an adventure rather than a cosmic responsibility. Not everyone with builder genes had wanted to come here. That had been Emily's first big decision. No one would be forced. No one would be pressured. If you carried the markers but wanted to live a normal life, that was fine. That was respected. This was about choice, not obligation. About 300,000 people had volunteered to explore their heritage. The rest went back to their regular lives, carrying secrets in their DNA they'd never activate. How's the progress? Asked Dr. Lisa Chen, the lead researcher. She was one of the few humans here without builder genes, but her expertise in genetics and neuroscience made her invaluable. Emily had insisted on including regular humans in the program. This wasn't about creating a genetic elite. This was about all of humanity understanding what they'd inherited. Slow, Emily admitted. But good. We're learning to interface with the basic systems. Navigation upgrades, efficiency improvements, safety protocols. Nothing dangerous yet. Yet, Lisa repeated with a knowing smile. But eventually? Emily looked out the window at the desert landscape. Somewhere up there, beyond the blue sky, the galaxy was watching. Waiting. Some species had accepted humanity's decision with grace. Others were still pushing, testing boundaries, looking for weaknesses. The Kresh Empire in particular had made several concerning moves near human space, their military fleets conducting exercises that felt more like intimidation tactics. Eventually, we'll have to make harder choices, Emily said quietly. But for now, we prove ourselves with small things. We show the galaxy we're not reckless children playing with matches. And they were proving it. The changes humanity had made to the gate network were subtle but significant. Navigation algorithms had been improved, cutting travel time by 30% across all gates. Safety systems had been upgraded, preventing the catastrophic failures that used to kill thousands of travelers every year when gates malfunctioned. Energy efficiency was up, meaning colonies on the edge of civilized space could afford to use the gates more frequently. Nothing flashy. Nothing threatening. Just steady, careful improvements that made life better for everyone in the galaxy. It was working. Slowly, grudgingly, the galactic community was starting to trust that maybe humanity wasn't going to immediately weaponize builder technology and start conquering the stars. "Emily, you've got a visitor," called out Tyler, one of the younger descendants. He was grinning, which meant it was good news. The visitor turned out to be Ambassador Thelnara. The crystalline alien had become an unlikely ally over the past months, one of the few council members who'd publicly supported humanity's cautious approach. Her light patterns were calm today, friendly rather than agitated. "Ambassador," Emily greeted her. "This is unexpected." "I was in the sector," Thelnara said, which they both knew was a polite lie. "I wanted to see your progress firsthand. And to deliver a message from the council." Emily felt tension creep into her shoulders. "What kind of message?" "The kind you'll like," Thelnara assured her. "The council has voted to formally recognize humanity's stewardship of the Builder Network. No more pressure for joint oversight. No more demands for shared control. You've proven yourselves responsible enough to be trusted, at least for now." The relief that washed over Emily was physical. She'd been carrying the weight of galactic suspicion for months, always worried that one wrong move would trigger sanctions or worse. "That's incredible news." "Don't celebrate too early," Thelnara warned, her lights dimming slightly. "Not everyone voted in favor. And there are still factions who believe humanity is dangerous. The Kresh Empire abstained from the vote entirely, which is their way of saying they're still deciding whether to accept the council's decision." Emily nodded. She'd expected this. Peace was never simple, never complete. There would always be someone looking for an advantage, someone who saw opportunity in conflict. "We'll keep doing what we're doing," she said. "Slow. Careful. Proving ourselves one day at a time." As Thelnara left to tour the facility, Emily returned to watching the Descendants train. Devon was showing Rachel something on his interface, both of them laughing as the hologram did something unexpected. In another room, a woman from Mumbai was practicing with a navigation system, her concentration absolute. Down the hall, a man from Toronto was working through builder mathematics, his normal human brain somehow able to grasp concepts that should have been impossible. They were learning. Growing. Becoming something new while staying fundamentally human. Emily felt the network in the back of her mind, always present now, like background music she'd learned to tune in or out as needed. It was vast beyond comprehension, stretching across the galaxy, connecting thousands of worlds. And it was waiting. Patient. Ready for the day when humanity would be wise enough to access its deeper secrets. That day wasn't today. Maybe it wouldn't be tomorrow either. Maybe it would take generations, centuries even. And that was okay. The builders had waited 200,000 years. Humanity could take the time they needed to get this right. "Do you think we'll ever be truly ready?" asked Lisa, coming to stand beside Emily at the window. Emily thought about the enemy she'd seen in those fragmented memories. The darkness that had driven the builders into hiding. She thought about the weapons and powers that lay dormant in the network, waiting for someone brave or foolish enough to awaken them. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "But I think the fact that we're asking that question, that we're worried about being ready instead of just grabbing power because we can, that's what makes us human. And maybe that's exactly what the builders were hoping for." Outside, the sun set over the desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Up there, beyond Earth's atmosphere, the gates hummed with ancient power and new purpose. A bridge between what humanity had been and what they might become. The inheritance had been accepted. The responsibility had been acknowledged. And now, one careful step at a time, humanity was learning to walk the path their ancestors had laid out 200,000 years ago. The galaxy was watching. Let them watch. Humanity would show them what the descendants of builders could do when they chose wisdom over power, patience over pride, and the long game over quick victories. The real journey was just beginning. And for the first time since that alarm went off at Gateway Station, Emily Carter felt ready to walk it.